the Sackler Colloquia on the science of science communication, where scientists and communication professionals come together to write a better future for communicating science.
Hello?
Gabrielle Wong-Parodi.
Yes?
This is Ben Strauss from Climate Central. One of your colleagues at Carnegie Mellon recommended you as an expert on communicating risk.
Well, I'm flattered. What are you looking for?
I'd like some help sharing results from a large study I'm leading on US vulnerability to sea level rise and coastal flooding.
Oh, well, tell me more.
We're building an online tool to show our results. I think it's very important that we share these results with the communities that could be affected most and with leaders. And it's got to be a powerful tool. I have the feeling that people really don't get the danger that climate change poses. And that's a problem I want to help tackle.
That sounds good. It sounds like an online tool could be really valuable.
Well, here's a rough sketch of what we're trying to do. We're generating a lot of data, and we don't want to dumb it down.
All right.
The first thing is, we're doing our analysis for every kind of place you can think of. We're analyzing every coastal state, every coastal county, every coastal city, town, even zip code. We're looking at congressional districts, we're looking at state legislative districts, we're looking at federal and state agency districts, even city council districts. We really want our work tailored for different audiences.
Well, that's a big positive. It's well known that the more you localize risks for specific audiences, the more you can command their attention.
Well, we're doing our analysis, too, for a huge number of potential impacts. We're looking at housing, we're looking at population subgroups, we're looking at infrastructure, from power plants to airports to road miles and rail miles. We're looking at critical facilities like hospitals or fire stations. We're looking at schools, churches, hazardous waste sites, military installations, parks, and more. Much, much, much more.
That's a lot.
And then we overlay our results against a spatial index of social vulnerability, divided into 3 categories based on a standard deviation method, so we can show how the physical exposure intersects with communities' intrinsic response capacity. And we have results that assume levees, when present, are adequate in their protection, and we have another set of results that assumes they're not adequate in their protection.
All right.
And finally, really, I think most important of all, the time dimension. We made localized sea level projections at more than 50 water level stations, but also integrated them with local flood statistics to generate forecasts of flood risk, not just sea level. So we want to show sea level projections, annual flood risk projections, cumulative flood risk projections, the difference.
Wow.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. We want to give users a choice of carbon emission scenario, of sea level model, and of what percentile estimate to view. How can we tweak our presentation so it really hits in the gut?
I see. I would like to help.
Terrific. So glad I called. Talk again soon?
Yeah, that sounds great. But I think we have a lot of simplifying to do here.
Hello?
Hi, Ben. There's something I want to talk about.
Yeah?
So, you say you really want people to get it. What does that mean?
That they understand the stakes, feel them, and that the feeling fits the stakes, and ultimately that action fits the stakes. I keep seeing surveys that show people ranking climate change low on their issue priority list. I know I'm a specialist, but that's tragic to me. I want people to have the right level of concern.
Listen, I sympathize, and I happen to agree on the threat level. But did you hear yourself? How can you know what the right level of concern is for someone?
Well, maybe not personally, but professionally. Risk priorities should be in the same order as risk ranks.
Well, people aren't always rational, at least in the way that you would like for them to be, or they may simply have different values and priorities. You can't just give them information and just hope that it works. There's so much more going on here.
That's a big problem.
Albert Camus once said, "Fiction is a lie through which we tell the truth." What if the only way to get people to feel the right level of concern, to really prioritize climate change according to its true risk, is to leave them with a false impression?
That's a bigger problem. I need to stay true to the science. That's my foundation. That's who I am.
I needed to know that. I feel the same way. I'm not interested in spinning this.
Okay, so here's the deal. We work together for compelling communication, as powerful as we can make it, that leaves the audience with a proper understanding of the facts.
Deal.
Great. Hello?
Hi, Ben.
Hey, Gabrielle.
Ben, you really have to slim down the way you show projections. This is not the control panel of the Starship Enterprise.
But I think it's important to give people a range of values and some choice depending on how much risk they feel they can tolerate. Besides, the answers depend on future carbon emissions, on top of all the model uncertainties.
Providing some simple, limited choices makes sense, just not the control panel of the Starship Enterprise. I'd suggest giving some limited choices, maybe 3 or 4, say on a spectrum of optimistic to pessimistic.
Optimistic to pessimistic. I like that. It seems like I could capture a bunch of things. The uncertainty in models, level of emissions, even some luck. Maybe give more of a personal feel or connection too.
That's what I was thinking, but first I'd like to test it.
Really? We're just talking about a couple of words here. I like your intuition.
You'd be surprised at the power a couple of words can have and how wrong intuition can be. Well, some surprises. There's one thing I've learned in my experience is that Data often trumps intuition. Pessimistic made people think that the situation was very bad, that it was a worst-case scenario, as I expected. However, it also made them feel like the situation was hopeless, that nothing can be done about sea level rise. Listen to what one person said. All of our coastal communities and development are doomed. Then she added, seems as though fast rise can be dealt with, but pessimistic makes me feel like nothing can be done.
Really?
And optimistic seems to make people think sea level rise isn't a problem at all. Listen to what one person said. That there's hope. It's okay that the sea level is rising because it's rising slowly and won't see any dramatic change soon. If we're optimistic about slow rise, then we really don't have to care.
So, we get rid of our bright idea and keep the terms simple, fast or slow.
That's what the data say.
Gabrielle.
Hey. So the results are in for the first big experiment using our simple research tool. Turns out that concern is highest for the participants we showed the 2050 projections, but not the 2020 or the 2100 projections.
Rather balanced outcome in light of the conflicting forces we imagined.
Yeah. People seem to care about the near term, right here and right now. The farther off the problem is, the less we worry, all else equal.
But the farther off into the future that we project sea level rise, the more dangerous it becomes. So how do those opposite trends play against each other? How steep or accelerated does the sea level rise curve have to be before it evokes more concern for the more distant future?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I think 2050 may be our sweet spot year because it's far off enough to have a real sea level rise effect, but it's not much more than a 30-year mortgage away. I know it's a stretch, but maybe people can imagine themselves in 2050 or somebody they know. But 2100 just seems too far away, no matter how awful the scenarios are.
Okay. So we established in this experiment that projections for 2050 evoke more concern. But is that concern appropriate? How well did subjects actually understand the risk? And did it vary by the treatment?
Well, it turns out that people really understood the 2050 numbers well as the 2020 figures. Honestly, I was quite surprised. I've rarely seen such good comprehension on a survey. However, there was a lot of confusion around the 2100 projections.
Well, at least that's nice to hear about the 2050 numbers. I think it provides some powerful guidance for this project. I do have a nagging doubt, though. We tested subjects using projections and flood statistics for New York City. How robust are the results going to be for different risk profiles from different places? Does each place have its own sweet spot year?
That is a really good point. I think I hear the sound of a new research proposal. Hello?
Gabrielle?
Yeah?
Before I show you the web tool, I have a confession to make.
Yes?
We couldn't do everything you recommended, or even that our work together suggested. You know, we had only so much money, time, and flexibility in the end, but we did try.
I understand. That's fair. But come on now, let's see it.
Okay. But first, a disclaimer. Analysis results appearing in this presentation are non-final and thus fictitious. Any resemblance to actual results, living or dead, are purely coincidental. So, you advise me to simplify. The website and pages should be broken into bite-sized pieces with a clear order. Here is an example of the home page for one state. We landed on the idea of breaking the tool into 4 page types to handle 4 main functions that we call where, when, what, and compare. That's mapping, projections, impacts analysis within communities, and threats compared among communities.
I like it.
And here's a look at a compare page. You can see we broke it up into sections too, and the interactivity basically works left to right. I'll spare you more detail, but we have the same basic organization on the other page types. Here's a look at some sea level rise and flooding projections in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I know you're from.
Oh, I hope I never see that happen.
Well, here's where you can choose between the simple slow through fast sea level rise scenarios we worked on labeling. How much carbon do you think we're going to put in the air? How lucky do you think we'll be? And how long do you think you'll live?
Oh, I like what you did there. A few simple choices up front like we discussed, but an advanced tab too. That's a bit harder to access. I assume that's where you put that control deck?
Couldn't help myself. Users who want can choose specific sea level models, emission scenarios, and low range to high range results given those parameters.
Well, that's fair. Actually, I think it'll be quite useful for some audiences. However, I'm a little bit concerned that there are too many options for most users, and it might be a little bit confusing.
Well, we did our best to explain, but I agree there's a risk.
Jumping back to the main window on the page, the bar chart, there's actually a lot more going on than we had discussed, a lot more information. Of course, we talked about focusing on 1 year, 2050, but also about how using a simple sentence versus a chart would improve most people's understanding. As a scientist, it's easy to forget sometimes how hard it is for people to understand numbers.
You know I'm not completely sold on 2050 yet. And honestly, I didn't really see how we could do it given the overall structure of the app. I take your points, though. We're planning to use those findings in other contexts, like one-page fact sheets and press releases. Here it just seemed important to provide richer data. But you inspired this part. If you hover your mouse over one of the columns, you get a pop-up that explains the finding in a sentence or phrase.
Oh, that's terrific. I like the simplicity of the description, too.
Well, I didn't forget your lectures about writing for a junior high reading level. You chopped up too many of my sentences after your little program evaluated them as written for philosophy majors.
Well, I hope people of all reading abilities can use this tool, and especially kids who are in junior high. They have a lot more at stake here than adults do.
That's all too true. Look, I'm so grateful for your help and can hardly believe that, well, we're almost there. We're almost ready for our October launch. Now comes the biggest test of all. How will people respond to the real thing when it's really about their backyards?
I can't wait either. I cannot wait to see.
Take care.
You too.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, Ben and Gabrielle. That was a great example of, I think, a very, very successful collaboration in the real world, and also of doing science communication about it in a most compelling way. Thank you also to Kara, who got us through the day, by keeping us very gently on time, and at the same time also, I think, keeping the energy level up for a very high day. I have two things. One, a quick reminder about the logistics of the meeting. A number of people have asked us if and when the slides and the presentations, the videos, will be available. And I guess my best estimate at this point is about 2 weeks or so, and they will all be, you can already watch the ones from the last Sackler, and they've been up for a long time. People have used them in classes and other things. The ones from this time will be up as well. And Steve Olson has been diligently writing, transcribing and writing and summarizing all the different talks, so those will be available before too long as well. I also want to just really quickly touch on a few themes just to wrap up the day that I think we've heard today, and they're not necessarily comprehensive in any way, shape, or form, but things that maybe once we talk about once you have a chance to have a drink at the reception, you can think about. I think we started the day with a theme that has really cut across both days, and that's the idea of the role that scientists should or should not play. Scientists as arbiters of what's knowable, I think Kathleen called it this morning, and not necessarily as actors in a policy arena. And the examples, I think, of the vaccines were very good ones. They can tell us what the probabilities are that certain things happen if we don't vaccinate, or if we only vaccinate to a certain level, but what that means in terms of mandating and so on are ultimately democratic choices. And Nick, I think, highlighted a few of the things that we can do to get closer to those democratic choices. The second thing, I think that was a really interesting one, at least to me, was the idea that we may be sitting very much like the hard sciences in a whole new set of instruments. And I was really hoping that Duncan wouldn't say this in the end when he says, you know, this allows us to see totally new things, because I wanted credit for that insight. But he said it anyway. So the idea that what we have with Twitter and a lot of these tools is an ability to make the invisible visible. It's almost like the scanning tunneling microscope, right? If you looked at the sun, the patterns of the sun that you saw, new ways of actually looking at this and of visualizing this that we've never had before. And I think that's something that we really need to think about in a completely new way, especially as social and behavioral scientists. I think the interesting thing also about Deb's presentation in particular, and I think a lot of us really were mesmerized by the visualizations that we saw of tweets moving out, and even just from one person, and what happens over hours. Of course, that also made Peterson Davis's point in many ways. That very animation that may sell Twitter to ESPN as an alternative to Nielsen or whatever else, meaning it's a sales pitch, of course, is also a great tool for science communication, and vice versa. What is a great tool for science communication may very well be a good sales pitch. So in other words, we have these collaborations that between business and between science communication, between corporate and what we know from corporate and what we know from science communication, that may actually be extremely useful, and maybe in areas that we don't necessarily anticipate. I think that was a great illustration of exactly that, and made a point, a practical application of that point. And the last one, I think that's also cut across as a theme, is the idea of ethics, and this certainly came out, I think, quite strongly in the early discussion about marketing, about persuasion, and that, you know, what can be done is not necessarily always what should be done. And I think even for narratives, we had some of that very same discussion. And I think the one question that I maybe want to close with is, well, we all know that these things are dual-use technologies, and I think somebody talked about this, right? Communication is that dual-use technology that can be used in different ways. One of the things that has, I think, implicitly also come through is that in many ways science is being held, and I think should be held, to a higher standard than most other forms of communication, or science communication rather should be held to a higher standard than most other forms of communication. And that may put us politically at a disadvantage, but I think giving up that higher standard comes with risks that, at least as far as I could tell, most speakers weren't willing to take at this point. So that's all I have to say, but I want to turn it over to Brooke Smith of Compass, and Compass obviously having been being one of our sponsors. And I'm looking for, there she is, for Brooke, who'll tell us a little bit more about, as Barbara was just about to have a heart attack, who will tell us more about the most important part of the evening, and that is the reception. Thank you so much.
All right, so I have the task of getting us ready to go recept. I thought it would be good for us all to just take a moment and think back to 48 hours ago before we all got here and remind ourselves of one of our collective motivations, perhaps for being here. This is certainly one of my motivations for being here. I was reminded and pulled this up just before I came up here of one of my favorite quotes from Carl Sagan that I wanted to read to you all. So one of the many great things he said was, "We've arranged a civilization in which the most crucial elements profoundly depend on science and technology. We have also arranged things so that almost no one understands science and technology. This is a prescription for disaster." So I'm one of those people who feels strongly that if we don't invest in science communication and science engagement, then we're not really maximizing our investment in science at all. And I appreciated yesterday when Baruch Fischoff started the whole conference. He said that it wasn't going to take any one individual in this room to help us avoid this impending disaster that Carl Sagan alluded to. It was going to take all of us. I also really appreciated Nash's comments about the value of connecting across networks and how that helps open up the flow of information. And that's something that we at Compass really agree with, and one of the reasons our organization exists is to help scientists connect across new networks. So I think that there's evidence to what I'm about to say. It might just be a hunch, but I'm pretty sure that one of the best ways to connect across networks is an open bar. So you all should have, when you entered and registered, put stickers on your name tags that identifies you with a certain collection of individuals, whether it's someone who studies science communications or practices it or teaches it. And Compass actually sponsored this open bar in hopes that people would talk to people not like them. And that's the purpose for your stickers. So your charge going into the next room is to find someone with different letters on their name tag than yours and share your biggest aha moment from Sackler the past 2 days. There are going to be note cards handed to you at the door and available at the bar. And we want you to write down your aha moments and share them with us. You have an option of tweeting your aha moments too. Bonus points for that if you can get it under 140 characters. But your choices are to write them down or to tweet them. You do not have an option to not do it. So go forth and meet new people and enjoy the bar. And thank you so much to the academies and to Dietram and Barbara and everyone. And thanks.